Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, malcontents. I am the malcontent, and it is Malcontentment Happy Hour. I don't want to call it unhappy hour, but there's a lot to be unhappy about. Today is Monday, December 27th. Have you noticed that 2021 has been getting longer and longer and longer? It's really getting that 2020 feel. So what's going on here? If you're watching us on TikTok and you're on Sidecam, we're over here in the studio. That's why you see me looking over here right now. By the way, if you're watching on our other channels, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter, and I'm looking over here, I'm looking at you right now. And if you see me looking over here, then you know that I'm looking at your comments. Shelly, hello, glad that you're here. Oh my goodness. Dora's in the house. Renee's in the house. My coffee is ready. I don't need coffee. What I need is sleep. All right. Let me explain to you what's going on. We put up a story yesterday. If you hadn't a chance to read it on our website, malcontentnews.com. On TikTok, you can go to our bio, Linktree, take you right to the website. And in that story, we outlined a case for hospitals in Washington State are going to hit a wall. If we look at the numbers, they're going to run out of capacity. There are several things that we have been looking at in the UK, in New York, in South Africa. We've been obsessed over South Africa numbers. You've been following us, particularly on TikTok. You know this. And there's some early data out of King County because we have data now through December 23rd. And King County transitioned to almost all Omicron about a week before that. And we have a little bit of hospitalization data. It's tiny, but it's really interesting what's in that local data. And it's painting a picture. And so with that, we got slides. TikTok, sorry, you don't get to see the slides because it's a TikTok thing. They have the live studio thing. The live studio don't work. I can't show you the slides. If you're on the other, by the way, if you want to go to the other channel, see the slides, malcontentnews.tv. That will take you to Twitch. The great thing about this is you don't need to have a Twitch account. You don't even need to have the app. You can just watch in the browser. Yeah, you're going to pop up going, hey, are you 18? You just tell it, yeah, I'm 18, and you're in. So, okay. Let's go into the slides. The cool thing is about this too, is when I'm looking at the slides, I can talk to you TikTok because the screen is just below me here. So there's three questions that we've been trying to answer. Question number one, is Omicron more transmissible than Delta? And for those of you on the slide, you'll see there is yes with an asterisk. Why is there an asterisk? Because we do not have a scientific peer-reviewed study with commentary that definitively says, why, yes, by golly, it is. That's why the asterisk is there. However, there's a ton of evidence at this point that says that it is more transmissible. We deal in facts. We generally don't like to use non-peer-reviewed data. The problem is Omicron's going to be over if we wait for the peer review. This will be done. So we have to go on best possible information available to us, and that's what we're going with. Well, I don't know why I'm sorry, it is not scrolling your comments over here. And I see all the questions coming on TikTok, and I will get to them. So the next question is Omicron more vaccine resistant? Is it more resistant, not just to vaccines, but to other public health measures? Monoclonal antibodies is an example. And the answer to that is very probable. What do you mean very probable? There's same thing. We do not have peer-reviewed studies. If we wait for peer-reviewed studies, this is going to be over. So with the best available information we have, it's very probable. Is Omicron more severe than Delta? That's starting to look like unlikely, but it's way more than a cold and a flu. And that's a big part of what we're going to go over tonight. The case to build and the evidence that we have coming out of the UK, starting to come out of New York City, and just trickling into Seattle. There's some really fascinating stuff that popped up in the data. All right, South Africa. We're going to take a look at there first for a moment. Hello, malcontents. I'm seeing all these names passing by. Wendy, Alvin, thank you. Debbie's in the house. Yes, we're going to talk about kids. I see tons of questions on TikToks. People are asking about kids. We're going to talk about kids. All right, so South Africa, what we've got up on the slide that you can't see on TikTok is COVID-related deaths. Yeets. I can't say the D word. Yeets. I know it's weird for the rest of y'all. You got to speak in Orwellian newspeak on TikTok. The average did go down today, but it has been moving steadily up and at a faster clip since December 10. And the average dropped down to 56 today. That's the moving average. That's down from 64. But remember, this is Monday's data from over Christmas weekend. So it's not complete data. This curve, when we get more data later this week, is going to continue to go up in the other way. Before yesterday, I don't know what the number is. I don't have it added up. So from week ending the 26th, the 7-day prior, 466 deaths from COVID in South Africa. In the UK, 407 hospitalizations, 39 deaths. That's Omicron. 407 Omicron hospitalizations, they're at 39 deaths. Australia had their first. Yeet today. All right. This is the slide that you can't see on TikTok. And this is the slide you can see everywhere else. If you want to see the slides, malcontentnews.tv, or you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. If you're on anything, all those channels except for Twitter, you can still comment. Just can't comment here on, oh, look at that. Yay, off the Twitch. I can't show it. That's the problem. Okay, so let me go over this slide. We have been tracking cases and hospitalizations in South Africa. We built a very simple model, and we have advertised this as a very simple model. So we are not epidemiologists. We're data geeks. There's a huge difference. All we simply did was Y cases in X weeks, in X week, Y hospitalizations in Z week. What does that mean in English? We looked at new cases, and then we looked at the hospitalization numbers for the week after. You don't get diagnosed with COVID, go in the hospital and drop and yeet in the same day. You get diagnosed, you go home, you try to do better for the most part, you go downhill, you might go back and forth to the hospital a couple of times, then you get admitted. And that ramp can take a week, roughly. That's why I say it's not perfect by any means, but it's interesting. Here's what we found. For those of you who can see on the slides, you can see the transition in South Africa from Omicron, from Delta to Omicron. If we look at the week of 11/21, hospitalizations, so we're looking at the week for new cases the week before, 11/14. So weekend 11/14, there were 2,188 confirmed COVID cases in South Africa. That resulted in 722 hospitalizations in the week of 11/21, the week after. 33%, 1 out of 3, ended up in the hospital. South Africa numbers are going to be different, just like every country has different ratios. If we look at the next week, the case number goes up. That's new cases through 11/21. Now remember, on that week ending 11/14, Omicron was identified on the 8th and was sequenced on the 11th. So when we're at that 14th, that's almost all Delta. When we get to 11/21, we know people are going to be stunned that I mentioned this woman's name in a positive light. We know from Dr. Angelique Coetzee, excuse me, threw up my mouth a little bit when I said her name out loud, because I'm not a fan. But we know from Dr. Angelique Coetzee, she said she started seeing her first patients on 11/18. So we know Omicron's starting to bubble up in the week ending 11/21. There's 3,923 cases. Well, of course, Omicron started to circulate. Cases are going up. 1,472 hospitalizations, 37.5%. Then the next week, 13,826. That's the week ending November 28th. So this is the same week that the World Health Organization said, hey, everybody, variant of concern. And we're really concerned. There were 4,055 hospitalizations that week, 29%. Notice the percentage starting to curve. Then we go to the next week. And I'm reading this, I know people on the other channels like, why is he reading the slide? Because people at TikTok can see it, and it's really important. 70,258 cases, 7,800 hospitalizations. That was the number on there today. I know it's a nice even number. I make up the numbers, they're their numbers. 11.1%. We're seeing that go down. We look at the next week. Now we started making forecasts at that point. We felt we had enough data that we could make a forecast. And we forecasted that hospitalizations would be between 6.5% to 9.8% of cases. There were 135,808 actual cases for the week ending 12/19. For the week 12/12. For the week ending 12/12, 8,806 hospitalizations. You ready for this? 6.5%. We live for data. We live for data. Then we've just finished up this week, right? So we have week ending data through 12/19 for cases, 141,000 and change. There's a tripod right in front of the numbers. That's why I have to say and change. We have preliminary, the first drop of hospital data. It's going to fill in because we have a lot of missing data. It's Christmas week. 6,275. That comes in 4.4%. Ha, it's going down. No, because there's something you don't see on the slide. When the preliminary numbers dropped last week, same day today, a week ago, it was at 4.2%. As the data filled in, it went up to 6.5%. So it's ticked up a little higher, but we think it's going to come again in right around that 6.5% to 7% when they add it all up. So we're seeing a consistent pattern. What is this showing us? What this is showing is that hospitalization rates in South Africa, Omicron versus Delta, are 70 to 80% lower. Omicron is 70 to 80% lower than it is with Delta. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not going to get into all the nuances of that. Is that good news? Sort of. But there's something really fascinating when we get to the punchline, that your brains are going to melt when we get to the punchline. The other thing is this 70, 80% number. There's several other studies that have come out that from people way smarter than me, with brains the size of planets. And they're coming up with the same numbers. So that's why we feel a lot more confident about the model. And again, ours is a really simple model. And we don't have access to all data. There's some other things that we know about what's going on in South Africa. 85% hospitalized are unvaccinated. 87% in the ICU, unvaccinated. Very, very high percentage. of people that are being hospitalized are unvaccinated. The other thing that we've learning out of South Africa is that if a person is hospitalized, the disease progression mirrors Delta if they're unvaccinated. If they're vaccinated, like you hear these things, oh, it was mild. They were in the hospital 2 days, a little oxygen, they got a little hydration, they sent them home. It's all good. Those are vaccinated people. The unvaccinated people, there is a ton of evidence, and not just now out of South Africa. They're seeing it in the UK. For the unvaccinated, you might as well get Delta. Particularly even if you had a previous infection, if that previous infection was more than 90 days ago, that's what they're seeing. That's a really important thing to understand. All right, we beat that slide to death. Functional RT. South Africa, they got up into the 3s. So what I mean by functional RT is what's the real RT, the spread. RT simplified. RT of 3, that's R naught. How much it spreads to people. If you have an R naught of 3, Trevor Bedford, Fred Hutch, says 50% of people get it. If you have an R naught of 4, 90% of the people are going to get it. This is where you might hear these numbers going around. 50% of people are going to get it. 90% of the people are going to get it. Right? You've seen this thing in the United States, 140, 160 million. That's based on R naught of 3. That's where they estimate half of the United States will catch Omicron in the next 60 days. That's where we're going with this. It's the next 60 days part. That's the problem. United Kingdom, they're seeing 4.4 as of December 23rd and a doubling time of 2.4 days. Check this out. You ready to have your brain? Here's your first mind blower. King County, Washington. Doubling time, 2.4 days. RT, 4.4. It is identical to the UK. To the number. So we can learn some stuff out of the UK, but not everything. Vaccine escape. I know for those who are watching on there, it's like, I've seen this slide because I like this chart. This is a really easy to understand chart. What have we learned about vaccine escape? Very simple. Moderna is the best. If you don't have a booster, you're probably going to get Omicron, and you're probably going to get symptomatic, and it's probably going to be like a gnarly cold. If you got Pfizer and you're not boosted, you're probably going to get Omicron, you're probably going to get sick, and it's going to be a really nasty cold. If you got Johnson & Johnson and you don't have a booster with an mRNA, not another Johnson & Johnson booster, you're probably going to get sick, and it's going to be damn close to the worst symptomatically, not literally, but symptomatically. Damn close to maybe the worst flu you've ever had in your life. You're going to be this close to ending up in the hospital with it. If you're not vaccinated, we're going to get in the numbers. Your relative risk of being hospitalized is somewhere between 44-fold and 60-fold higher, even with the previous infection. Now, if you got a booster, Moderna plus a booster, you might get asymptomatic, you might get a little something. Pfizer, the same thing. Johnson & Johnson with the booster, think of it like if you got Moderna all the other way. You're probably going to get sick. You're probably going to be symptomatic. And it's going to be a suck-ass cold, symptomatically. Now, this assumes no other comorbidities. You're not 80 years old. You're not in a communal living setting. You're able to get proper rest, medication, hydration. There's tons of factors. And I could stand up here and talk for 2 hours to go over all those different factors. I don't have time for that. Thoughts on vitamin? Is vitamin D going to keep you from No. Should you take vitamin D anyway? Yeah, particularly if you live in a dark place like Seattle, where we take vitamin D by the handful and drink coffee this time of year, although we're loving the snow. All right, so we're not going to belabor the vaccine escape. Monoclonal antibodies. I want to talk about this. This is important. The Lilly and the AstraZeneca monoclonal antibodies do not work against Omicron. There's no nuance here. Does it kind of? No, it doesn't. So, and I know there's some states that are still pushing hard. Just go get the monoclonal antibodies. Look, if you're that afraid, and to the point that you're like, well, I want the monoclonal antibodies, I guess it is real. then I'm telling you, if you're not getting Sotrovimab, just go swallow some Tic Tacs and pretend they're pills that make you better, because the placebo effect might be a little bit stronger. That's what the data is showing. Here's the problem with Sotrovimab, because when we wrote this story yesterday about what's going to happen in Washington hospitals, people, what about Sotrovimab? What about Paxlovid? What about Molnupiravir? We're going to go into that real quick. Sotrovimab, 55,000 doses for the entire United States. Washington State, we have 552 doses for December. Going to get 300,000 doses in January for the entire United States. Let me give you some perspective. In 6 weeks during the Delta surge, Florida used 130,000 doses of monoclonal antibodies all by itself. 300,000 is a drop in the bucket. When you think about caseload, it's not just about severity, it's caseload, and that's what we're going to get into. That's like the punchline. All right, what about Paxlovid? No doses right now. There might be a handful out there, but you're going to have to be like Donald Trump or Joe Biden to get those. You, me, that we ain't getting those. There are probably a few doses floating around, but it ain't for us. You, Jeff Bezos, you're going to get your Paxlovid. You bet your sweet ass you are. 265,000 doses across the United States. However, you have to take it with another drug which is used for HIV. It's taken over 30 days. You have to be carefully monitored when you are taking Paxlovid. If you are taking statins, certain blood pressure medicines, if you have liver or kidney problems, if you're on certain antidepressants, it's contraindicated. You can't take it. Now think about this. Statins, blood pressure medicine, and antidepressants. Who does that leave in the United States? So the other problem that you have is, in the anti-vax community and the I don't trust anything community, they're going to turn off on this just because, wait a minute, I got to take an HIV drug with this too? Oh, that ain't happening. No way. And then the other thing is, because you need close monitoring with the doctor, you're going to need to be somebody who can take time off from work, have a good doctor, afford all those copays for the doctor appointments. So guess who's going to get Paxlovid? It ain't going to be you and me. It's not going to be you and me. Molnupiravir, this also has contraindicated medications. There's certain medications you cannot take, and it's only 30% effective at preventing hospitalization or the progression of COVID. The other thing is, and this is the other elephant in the room, Sotrovimab, Paxlovid, Molnupiravir. You have to take them early, at the earliest onset of symptoms and testing. And it's getting really hard in a lot of places in the United States to get a PCR test and get your results within 48 or 72 hours, and then get a doctor's appointment to get the prescription or the pill or the antibody treatments. These are not going to be on the playing field. These are, yes, I know. It's like, I'll use a terrible baseball analogy. They in AAA, they showing tons of promise, but we're only going to be able to call them up if, the big pitcher, his arm's thrown out and he can't pitch a couple of games. Then we can pull them up. That's about the amount of play we're going to get out of these meds. I don't know. I'm just a ray of sunshine tonight, aren't we? Disease-acquired immunity, I always like to talk about this. It's the same thing. We have tons of data that show this. What do you mean by disease-acquired? Well, I've already had COVID, and I'm now immune for life. Wrong. Not true. Not even close. I should have brought my cowboy hat here to do Sheriff Omicron. That's not the case. There are people who had Delta in New York City 4, 6, 8 weeks ago, and they're like, I got Omicron. I hate my life. I don't know how this happened. I have Omicron and I'm symptomatic. That actually includes vaccinated, but not boosted, but two dose or one J&J dose people. So, wrong. And what they have found for disease-acquired immunity, you have about a 240% greater chance of getting sick. And we have data not only of South Africa, we got data out of UK, and we're starting to gather data in New York City, and we've got some data in Washington State, and I've brought receipts for that. Anyway, we're going to talk about that. And why is that? You're not seeing the slide because we have all these mutations, including 32 spike protein mutations. London School, now we're getting to the punchline. We've built it up. It's time to get to the punchline. London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine built models, and they've updated them. And they updated those models based on information that came out. And this is for the UK. And there was updated information, which I'll get to on December 22nd, which had the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine update their UK projections for cases, mortality, hospitalizations, and mortality on December 23rd. And they lowered their baseline severity down in that data. If you're on malcontentnews.tv, you can see the slides. That is based off of data that came from the London Imperial College COVID-19 response team, report number 50. Yeah, they have to report 50. They had a lot of reports. If you're on malcontentnews.tv, or you're on Facebook, or you're on YouTube, or you're on Twitter, and you're looking at this slide, and you're like, oh, this slide hurts my brain. What is this slide? All right, I can explain a little bit this to you. I was not able to get on the radar of Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent to go, can you help me understand this a little bit better? And I couldn't find an epidemiologist today to go, can you help me to understand this a little better? But I can explain some of it. Pillar 2 is, think of that as you went up to a drive-up test site. Pillar 2 is you were tested for COVID in the UK, but you weren't tested at a hospital. Pillar 1 and 2 is you were tested at a hospital, or you tested at a clinic, etc., and you ended up in the hospital. That's the difference between Pillar 2 and Pillar 1. There's uncorrected and corrected. So they're looking at raw data, and the corrected just means they're adjusting the data. So that's what you're looking at on that slide. And what this is showing is the relative risk, Delta compared to Omicron, of becoming sick or landing in the hospital. Their numbers that they're coming up with are, for the UK, are not as good as South Africa. They are predicting a higher hospitalization rate. Well, that doesn't make sense. The reason they're predicting a higher rate is South Africa is very young. The UK is much older, and people in South Africa, even when you factor for HIV, are healthier than people in Europe and people in North America. In part because they don't have a lot of age-related disease in South Africa. That's part of what's driving the numbers. There's another thing that came in this report, which is not great news for the United States. They found, because they now have enough data to start looking at who's ending up in the hospital and who's having breakthrough cases and the severity of those breakthrough cases, and they're finding, to their surprise, that the AstraZeneca vaccine, unboosted versus unboosted, is performing better than the Pfizer vaccine. Now, we don't have AstraZeneca in the United States. Our closest proxy is Johnson & Johnson, and the Johnson & Johnson is not doing well against Omicron. So the reason I say this isn't great news for the United States, early data, not peer-reviewed, but it's all we've got, and if we wait for peer-reviewed, this is over. So we have to go with the best guesses we have. And if we look at the information that we have out of there, right, we don't have AstraZeneca. We got Pfizer, we got Moderna, you got people like me who took the vaccine short bus and got Johnson & Johnson. And why did I pick Johnson & Johnson? Because when J&J became available, it was kicking Beta's ass in South Africa. And it was like, well, Beta's the new variant. It's doing good with variants. I'm going to go with the one that's better with variants. That was my decision. By the way, I got the Moderna upgrade. If you got J&J and you're not boosted, find a booster, go mRNA, unless you have some really pressing medical reason. And if you do, talk to your primary care physician about your options. But J&J plus J&J equals not much. All right, back to slides. Okay, now back to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They updated UK projections, 4 models. There's low immune escape, high booster efficacy, low immune escape, low booster efficacy, high immune escape, high booster efficacy, and then finally, high immune escape and low booster efficacy. So what does that mean? The first one is Omicron's not breaking through immunity and vaccines, and boosters really work. Well, we know that's not the case, right? Because we're seeing a lot of immune escape. The next one is not a lot of immune escape, and boosters aren't helping, but we're not seeing that either. The third one is it's breaking through, but boosters really help. That's the one. And then the last one is it's breaking through and boosters aren't helping, and we're not seeing that. And Israel is a great example, right? Because they are heavily boosted. They were one of the first countries, I think they were number 3 to go, we got Omicron. And look at where they're at in their case growth, because they started even before the UK or Denmark. And look where they are in comparison to Norway, UK, Denmark, Italy, France, Spain. It's going up. Not denying that, but it is minuscule. Boosters. So we looked at the high immune and the high immune escape and high booster efficacy because there's really strong evidence. That's the model that fits. Now for the UK, it means they're going to have record hospitalizations based on this model on everything they know now. They may learn a couple more in a couple of weeks, and it'll go up. Now let's look at what's going on in New York City. See, I'm drilling down to Washington. If you wondered about Washington, we're almost to the punchline. But I'm trying to show you how we got to our conclusion, that we didn't just grab this out of the air. There is data and science behind this. New daily COVID hospitalizations in New York City, the metro New York area, are up 320% in a week. They went from 160-ish in change 7 days ago to 810 yesterday. That's new hospitalizations. Washington State, Seattle, Bellevue, we are 7 days behind where New York City is. It's coming. And I got receipts. COVID hospitalizations have more than doubled there in 7 days. They're up 106%, and ICU is up 63%. We also have data out of New York on who's getting hospitalized. You would guess? You would take guess? You would guess? Yeah, it's the unvaccinated. The people who are getting hospitalized are unvaccinated, and look at the ICU numbers. They're up 63%. Same disease progression. Look what's going on in the UK. 407 hospitalized, 39 have died. Confirmed Omicron. If you're hospitalized and you're unvaccinated, this is not a cold. It's real. It's every bit as bad as Delta. If it is a little, it is like incremental. We're talking 10 or 20% less on the dial. And don't forget, Delta had more on the dial than Beta, and more on the dial than Alpha, and way more on the dial than the original strain. I haven't seen actually any study doing a comparison of the original strain or Alpha to Omicron. That would be interesting, but I get it. They're trying to compare O to Delta. Why is all this happening? Again, because it has all these mutations. Now let's talk about Washington State. We're to the meat. A little bit more than 75% of everybody in Washington State who is 12 and over is fully vaccinated. That means 2 dose, 1 dose J&J. We have 1.65 million Washingtonians who are eligible for booster shots right now, today. The booster data is pretty good, actually, but we don't have enough people boosted. We have estimate of 649 staffed acute care beds available statewide. That was as of December 21st. That's the best data we have. That's it. That's not for COVID. That's for everything. There are 649 open beds in the state of Washington, hospitals for everything. 143 staffed ICU beds are open. Again, that's not for COVID. That's for everything. That's car accident, burn victim, industrial accident, attempted yeeting. 143. And that's of December 21st. We don't have numbers going back a week. New case rate in the state of Washington as of today, 7-day moving average, 320. It hasn't, technically it has been higher at the very beginning. When we were first, we're tired of being first here in Washington State. We're really tired of it. That is one of the highest 7-day averages that I've ever seen for new cases in the state of Washington. And we've just gotten started. And don't forget, that's Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the 26th, which was a Sunday with a snowstorm. If you're not from here, Sunday with a snowstorm. And a lot of test centers closed. Tons of testing locations, both public and private, were closed today because of snow, ice, staffing, because people are sick with COVID, and in some places, bitter cold. And you guys are a bunch? Yeah, we are. We're kind of snow wimps here because we have no snow. Our snow removal plan is it snows, the sun comes up, snow melts, snow removed. We're going to be below freezing for a week after getting 4 to 7 inches of snow. Some places 10, 12, 14 inches of snow out of the central Puget Sound lowlands, north and south of here. Got a lot more, particularly north of here, got a lot more. And outside of like the highways and the main lines, that is literally the snow removal plan. Sun comes up, snow melts, snow removed. Yeah, that's not happening for the week. That actually may help us a little bit. Omicron is 95% of cases as of 12/23, December 23rd. Test positivity. By the way, we haven't been able to publish test positivity date from the Washington State Department of Health since September 1st, and we won't have it until February 28th now of 2022. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. UW Virology Lab reported yesterday 19.1% statewide of the tests that they ran, which was over 10,000 samples. We've never had a rate that high statewide. It's not even close. The highest rate we had was 13.5% on August 30th of 2021. Yesterday they were at 9. Now that is 7-day moving average. But the thing is that we don't have the data to do a 7-day moving average because we don't have the data from the state. So I am comparing 7-day from a 1, 19.1%. Omicron's on a tear. All right, let's keep talking about the current situation in Washington State. We did our little 1 minute, and we're going to do those as 1 minute with just the slides so we can make them shareable. I know you can't stitch and duet stuff on TikTok if we go over 60 seconds. And I know some people probably are not going to like that there wasn't as much explanation, that it was just, hey, we got your scorecards and we're just going to throw them up now. Like you're watching, if you're Gen X, you're going to know what I'm talking about. So it's like watching the Weather Channel at the 8-minute mark on the 8s where they would do the weather forecast. And I totally get it has that vibe, but that's the only way we can get those 8 hospital regions out like that. By the way, all the new followers, thank you so much. You also can follow us on the other channels if you want, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I'm going to stop for a minute. Spam those hearts. Go ahead and spam those parts. If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitch, you could use our emotes. Let our mods and admins know that you really appreciate all of the hard work that they do, because they work really, really hard. You make them work really hard, TikTok. Really hard. So go ahead and spam those hearts. And if you're not feeling very hearty on those other channels like Facebook, you just give us a like. You give us the thumbs up. All right, so what do we know about the current situation in Washington State? We have no counties with low transmission. I love it. I see the hearts that you did there. I love this. Thank you so much, Pax. Love it. We have 10 counties with moderate transmission. Moderate transmission is defined as 7-day moving average of 75 to 99.9 new cases per 100,000 people. Moderate. We have 10 at moderate. So moderate is from moderate is Sorry. Tripping on myself. Moderate is 2501 to 74.9. 69.99. Sorry, little ADHD moment there. We have 10 that are moderate. We have 7 that are substantial, 75 to 99.99. By the way, if I tripped up on that, someone blow me up in the comments and go, you got that wrong, buddy. And then high is over 100. We have 22 of 39 counties that are high. We label counties extreme if their 7-day moving average new case rate is over 200. So if it's double high. I'm not going to read off the whole list. People that are on the slides, they can see it. Because it looks like the extreme. It looks like, the school closing for the snowstorm. See, I brought that together. We consider very high anything from 199.99 to 150.1. There's one county, that's Mason County, and then we have the rest that are high. So there's 22 total in there. Some key call-outs that are there. Pierce, Snohomish, Thurston, King, and Spokane counties. And Clark. These are our most populated counties in the state of Washington. So all of our highly populated counties have very, very high rates. And Skagit you can add to that list too. And they're right up there. What's happened in Western Washington? It isn't all because of these super spreader events that happened with the wrestling matches at the high schools back in early December, on December 4. But it's a big driver of it, particularly in Pierce County has the highest rate of COVID cases in the entire state of Washington. They're at 517 7-day moving average per 100,000. That's yikes. That's just because we haven't even gotten started. If we look at it by vaccination rates, it doesn't matter. Every vaccination tier you look at is in high transmission. It is skewed right now to these higher population counties, but we're starting to see the numbers grow in the rural counties. And probably what's happened here now is we have everybody that's gone for Christmas over to Pass to go see grandma and grandpa back out there at Moses Lake at the ranch. And they brought the gift of Omicron. And we're going to see these numbers in Eastern Washington blow up in the next 7 to 10 days. New Year's is going to be the final nail, so to speak, in that. All right. Chelan County, I saw your question. I just happened to look over there, and I believe Chelan is in our high transmission. They're in high. If you want to know where your county is, don't go now. Stay on the live. We have a TikTok that we put up. It's our most recent unpinned TikTok. And that has every county in it in less than a minute in the state of Washington and the hospital district they're in and what the average is within that hospital district. You can check every county. We got you covered, Washington. All right. I know people have been asking these questions. Who's getting sick? Is it the vaccinated? Is it the unvaccinated? We got that. We know it for King County. King County's got great data. That's why people like Trevor Bedford and Fred Hutch is watching King County so closely. And that's why other data nerds and epidemiologists are watching King County, Washington, because we have really good data. Over the last 30 days, if you are unvaccinated, you have a 6 times greater chance of getting COVID than a vaccinated person. That's in the last 30 days. And that was through December 23rd. So there's still a fair amount of delta in that data, but there's, 10 days where Omicron's probably the most dominant strain in there. So we're going to watch this very closely. We need about 3 more weeks of progression to get the answer. Hospitalizations, you are 40 times more likely. In the UK, they've concluded you're 60 times more likely. 40 times more likely to get hospitalized if you are unvaccinated. And for yeets, sorry, rest of the channels, if I say the D word too many times, the TikTok gods get mad. If we go to yeets, you're 44 times more likely to get yeeted. Now remember, it's like you got to win 3 prizes. First, you got 6 times, right? To end here, you have to go through 3 gates. You got to go through the first gate. You got to get it. You don't just yeet. You got to get COVID first. So you have a 6 times greater chance of getting COVID. Once you have COVID, if you're unvaccinated, compared to the vaccinated person standing next to you, you have a 40 times greater chance of landing in the hospital. Now, if the vaccinated person standing next to you also wins the unlucky lottery and they land in the hospital despite having a 40 times lesser chance of having that happen, that's relative risk. Somebody in the comments could explain relative risk. Then you have a 44 times greater chance of going yeet than the vaccinated person in the hospital bed next to you. See, it's like you got to go through each of these. That's King County, Washington data for the last 30 days. This will be pure Omicron data in about 2.5 more weeks. They update these numbers every day. It's really cool. All right, so what's the punchline? Who's getting sick? You can't see this if you're on Malcontent News TV. You go over to Twitch, or you can go to YouTube, you can go to Facebook or Twitter. You can watch it there. Who getting sick? The unvaccinated. And King County is 83% vaccinated. And the rate, now this is through December 16th. That's the most recent data they have on the 7, because it's 7-day moving average through December 23rd, because 24th, 25th, 26th. So we're going to have updated data on the 27th. So on 7-day moving average, for vaccinated, 23.7 out of per 100,000 are testing positive for COVID. For unvaccinated, it's 81.6. It's almost triple. And this is Omicron. This is all Omicron when we look at these numbers. It's not all. It's damn close. By the 16th, King County was damn close to all Omicron, about 70%. That's who's getting it. It's the unvaxxed. And here's the thing, keep this in mind. Only 17% of King County, that's 5 years old and up, not 12, 5 and up. Only 17% are unvaccinated. And Omicron is tearing through the unvaccinated in King County. That's an important point, because we have data from South Africa and the UK on who's getting hospitalized and their outcomes. This is it. This is the punchline. If you've been waiting, here it is. This is the punchline. This is when I was like, mind's blown. Mine's going to be blown. If I got epidemiologists, followers and pals and mutuals on here, prepare for your brain to explode. There's been a 58% increase in hospitalizations in King County in the last 7 days. That data is through 12/23. Those hospitalizations are almost all Omicron. They're not going to genomically sequence everybody, but King County was, again, like 70% Omicron, 7 days at the start of that window, and by 12/23 was at 95%. This is almost all Omicron. Since the start of COVID, since the first King County person landed in the hospital on February 13th of 2020 at Evergreen Health in Kirkland, Washington, his first King County hospitalization, 4.7% of anybody who has had a positive COVID test in King County has ended up in the hospital. That, by the way, is much lower than the rest of Washington state, which is at about 5.5%. Why is it lower? Because King County has mask mandates and has always had mask mandates. Even when the state ended mask mandates, we had mask mandates. And we've been checking for people to make sure they're vaccinated for months, because that's in that data. And we've had a higher vaccination rate. We have a higher, when I say we, because I live in King County, we have a higher booster rate. Well, it's like all that stuff works or something. This is very early data. I will give that. But for the last 7 days, positive test to hospitalization has been 0.9%. You know what's wild about this? That 4.7% to 0.9% lines up perfectly to the decimal point to Gauteng province in South Africa. To the decimal point. We have a hospitalization model, we have a vaccination model, we have updated disease progression information out of the UK, we have validation of our model from multiple sources. And the numbers are starting to line up when we look at the other pieces of the puzzle that are available to us. And I get it. I'm playing journalist epidemiologist. I totally get it. So I still say you take it with a grain of salt, but we're like feeling pretty groovy. Because that goes back to this chart, which you can't see. But when you do the math, it mirrors what's been happening in Gauteng province in South Africa. It's the same percentages. All right, so now it's just math. It's real simple. Since January 20th, 2020, that's when the first COVID case arrived in Washington. We were first in the United States. First person arrived confirmed on January 21st. Everett Providence Hospital in Snohomish County, that person recovered. There have been 804,316 confirmed cases through December 18. That's the most recent data because I'm looking at hospitalization. I want to use apples to apples. There have been 44,376 COVID hospitalizations through that same time period across Washington state. Not all those hospitalizations are Washington citizens because we take people from Alaska and Idaho, and Montana, and parts of Oregon, the eastern parts of Oregon, which might as well be Alabama. Yeah, it's opinion piece. Idaho, I don't even know what Idaho is. That means to the first hospitalization to December 18th, 5.52% of people that got COVID have landed in the hospital in Washington state. If we adjust, but only looking at King County, that's really important because King County is 83% vaccinated. If we look at a place like Stevens County, rural county, get it, they're 33% vaccinated, and that's 12 and up. That's not 5 and up, 12 and up. So their vaccination rate is lower than Gauteng province in South Africa. Wait a minute. South Africa's 26% vaccinated, 26-33. You're making stuff up. I said Gauteng province. 44% of eligible population in Gauteng province is fully vaccinated. 66% of everybody over 50 in Gauteng province is fully vaccinated. Those numbers are better than 8 counties in Washington state and are about equal to states like Alabama and Mississippi. Yeah, those states are in trouble. Got to distinguish. So if we do the adjustment, it's 1.14%. If we follow what's going on in King County, it's math. It's not perfect math. There's an error bar in there. We don't know what the error bar is, but there is an error bar. And we think that the error bar, we think 1.14 is low because vaccination rates in other parts of the state of Washington and the amount of people who are unvaccinated and what we know based on what we're seeing in King County, who's getting sick, who's getting hospitalized, what they're seeing in UK and what they're seeing in New York and what they saw in South Africa. So now let's look at the future. On 12/26, there are 728 hospitalized COVID patients across the entire state of Washington as of yesterday. We have 649 open beds. We have 143 open ICU beds, fully staffed. So that assumes that nobody in the hospital gets sick. It also assumes we get no surge capacity, no FEMA strike teams. They're not going to activate the National Guard. I've had a lot of people go, why don't they activate the National Guard now? The problem with activating the National Guard are the people who are weekend warriors. They doctors and nurses during the week. And what happened in other states is people were like, hey, you know what? The National Guard just activated me, and I know I'm working 16 hours a day trying to save COVID patients in this hospital, but I have to go. And it made things worse. In some states, not all states. It literally made things worse because it pulled people that were already acting as hospitalists out of hospitals, and in some cases, redeployed them where they weren't needed. And so there was the double whammy of military, hurry up and wait. Anybody that's done anything with the military, civilian or military, knows what hurry up and wait is. Or the impact from them getting yanked out. So activating the National Guard is not the answer. And I'm so frustrated with Joe Biden, and that's a whole different stream. 78% who are getting hospitalized in Washington State, or I'm sorry, King County, 78% who are getting hospitalized in King County, unvaccinated. 22% vaccinated. See, the vaccines don't work. It's because there's so many vaccinated people. Don't fall into the data fallacy of the percentages. 83% of the people are vaccinated. So the 22% number of that whole is a tiny fraction. Why 78% of just 17% of people who are not vaccinated is a huge slice. It's a data fallacy if you look at the percentages. At 10,000 cases a day, that's one new cases a day. And on paper, Washington State should be at 10,000 new cases a day and accelerating this week. At 10,000 new cases a day, that's 114 new hospitalizations a day. And that assumes that that rate holds at King County. That's 798 hospitalizations a week. Yeah, but I was told it's just a day or two and then you go home. If you're vaccinated, 78% are unvaccinated. So you have 622 of those 798 hospitalizations are going to be in the hospital for more than a couple of days. Some of them are going to go home at day 3. Some of them are going to go home at day 20. Some of them are never going to go home. That's the reality. Think of it as a bathtub, right? Bathtub has that overflow, so it's kind of hard to intentionally, a well-designed bathtub in a house that has its plumbing set up right, it's kind of hard to intentionally overflow a bathtub, right? Because you have, the level goes up, it reaches a point, you reach this equilibrium, blah, blah, blah. I just went full George Bush on you. So at 798 coming in each week, and 622 sticking around, that bathtub is filling. How many beds? Oh, that's right, there's 649 empty beds. The IHME is predicting that the peak for Washington State at the end of January will be 28,000 cases a day. It's math. We're out of runway. We're driving towards a cliff. There is nothing that's going to stop this car from going over the cliff. Now, that gets into then, well, what does that mean? I'll tell you this. If you're unvaccinated and you're thinking like, well, it's okay because all the unvaccinated got hospital beds, you better hope it is equal to Delta. Because if it's mild and they're looking at you and the heart attack next to you, they may decide the heart attack gets the bed because maybe you can hold out, because that's where it got in places like Idaho. The Secretary of Health, they're not called the Secretary of Health, but the equivalent of Secretary of Health in Idaho, I cannot remember the specific title. The day they declared crisis standards of care for the entire state of Idaho, the same day, 4 hours later, his mother had a stroke. Do your own research. It's on Google and DuckDuckGo. This broadcast brought to you by DuckDuckGo, because we don't trust Google because they're big technology. But we'll go and complain about it on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Twitch, which is big technology. I don't know. I thought it was funny. His mother waited for over 4 hours, had a stroke, and got sent home. She didn't get a hospital bed. She got sent home. And the next day he was like, well, I'm having to live through the results of my decision because my mother had a stroke and there was no bed and they sent her home. But you see, that's because Delta was so bad. So if you're unvaccinated and you're just convinced it's the cold, you better be right. I mean, you better be wrong, actually. Take that back. You better be wrong. Because it could be your ass that doesn't get the bed when they triage. And then you're just going to have to figure it out. Like people that had strokes and heart attacks did in Idaho, and Montana, and Alaska, and what's going on in Wisconsin, in Iowa. There's a story out today in Iowa. Guy got sepsis because of a stent surgical stent that had been done years ago, just got infected. And the hospital that could do the surgery had no place for him. So he was in a smaller regional or rural hospital for 15 days with sepsis in his gut. I've had torsion of my omentum twice. Neither led to sepsis. One of them I was told like you were that close. The pain was undescribable. I cannot imagine laying in a bed with sepsis for 15 days. They finally were able to get opened up for him. 17 hours in surgery. The surgeon said it is the worst infection they had ever seen. He didn't make it because the hospitals were filled with COVID patients. This is the real. Look it up. It's on Google and DuckDuckGo, and it was in Iowa. So what can you do? All right, I complained all this stuff, and then we're going to go to your questions. I see the comments going by, I see questions going by. We're going to go to your questions because we're done with the slides. What is King County Public Health saying? If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. There's some people I know that have come to me and they're like, but it's here. It's not. Anything is better than nothing. If you have your, first of all, I am not in the capacity of giving official medical advice. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. You should talk to your primary care physician or other medical professional when making decisions about your own health. You should get the Moderna vaccine. If you can't find the Moderna and your shot is it's Pfizer or wait, get the Pfizer. If you are convinced, just kind of looking and seeing the numbers and and I know a lot of you are like Donald Trump said, and you're just like, screw him, I don't care what Donald Trump. But if you're just like, Jesus Christ, Donald Trump just friggin' laid out Candace Owens over. My whole family's mad at me, and Donald Trump might be mad at me now. If that's where you're at, get the friggin' shot. Get your first dose, because it's better than zero. It's something. If you get a booster, get a booster. And I know everybody in Western Washington is going to blow up the comments. Where do I find a booster? Go to I can't drive. The roads are covered in ice and snow. We've been telling you to get boosters. There are some places doing walk-ins. The other thing you might want to do, because the roads are covered in ice and snow, you might want to check with places and just say, hey, did you get cancellations? Right? Because the roads are shitty. The main roads are fine now, but the side roads, right, are shitty. So you might want to check, right? Is there a cancellation? Can I get it? If you have J&J and you're looking for the boost, don't get Moderna. Go with Moderna because the data is very supportive. Get home test kits. Good luck with finding home test kits. $400 like on eBay and Facebook Marketplace. Good luck. I'm just passing along what I was told to tell you. If you feel sick, right? Oh, I think I have a cold. It's my allergies. I get seasonal. It's Omicron. Just assume it's Omicron and isolate. Avoid large indoor events. New Year's Eve, forget it. Just no. Go to the. I'm originally from Boston. If there's any Massachusetts peeps on here, you're gonna love this. Go bang a Yui, take the Rotary, go to the Packy, get yourself some freaking bubbles, and go back home. Turn on WBZ, watch the fireworks in Boston on your feckin' TV set, and drink the bubbles and go to bed. For the rest of you, what does that mean? It means you go drive down the road, you can bang a turn, you're going to go into a Rotary, go through the Rotary, there's going to be a store that sells booze, pick up a bottle of champagne, go home, watch TV. Sorry. That's vaxxed or not. No. New Year's, no. If you're an employer, you run a business, you need to be contingency planning for large-scale employee absences. And we're seeing this already, right? We're seeing flight. Now, the flight cancellations that we're seeing aren't all because of COVID. We have bad weather. We weren't impacted by it, but other areas have had very severe weather, and that's canceled flights. There was a flight that got turned back from China today. I think it was a United flight or a Delta flight, got turned back midair because China was like, we got the COVID, and you might have people. No, we don't want your. Ironic, isn't it? We don't want your COVID. You're trying to get ready for the Olympics. I don't know. I don't know what China's going to do with the Olympics. I'm like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do with the Olympics? Beijing's got the Olympics. Good luck. If you're a parent, right, kids are out of school, and this isn't just Washington State. I'll tell you that this could be New York City, Miami-Dade County, another area that's getting hammered. Houston starting to get hammered. Boston area, hammered. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, right, Western PA, Ohio is really blowing up. Your kids are out of school. You should have it in the back of your head that your kids might not be going back to school on January 3rd. Don't think not remote class. Too many people sick to open up the schools. Too many people that are just out. There's another thing I want to address too, because I've seen some stuff social. It's local chatter, but I've seen local chatter on social. The store shelves are empty. Panic and woe. Really, Western Washington, really? And then, of course, it's all Biden's fault. Joe Biden's supply chain. Let's run down this, Western Washington, okay? Thursday was the day before Christmas Eve. Friday was Christmas Eve. Saturday was Christmas. Sunday is the biggest shopping day in retail of the year, and because the day after Christmas is the biggest shopping day of the year, and we had a snowstorm, which would have impacted, snowstorm to the point like businesses closed. Lots of businesses closed. So you had a bunch of people going into the stores because it was Christmas, buying everything in sight and buying stuff for Christmas dinner, amplified by everybody going, oh my God, I need to buy up all the milk, eggs, and bread because it's going to snow. I need my French toast supplies. Longtime malcontents will love what I just put in there about the French toast. Of course the store shelves are empty on the day after all this. Because a lot of stores get shipments on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays too. Tuesday's usually the basement. It'll be better. But there's going to be supply chain disruptions. We've been saying that since October, and you should be prepared. I've talked about this every stream. You should fully expect over the next 60 days that maybe the grocery store you go to is going to be closed for a day or two, because there just isn't enough people who aren't sick to run the store. And they're going to have to close the store for a day or two. We're not talking about the apocalypse, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a few extra cans of Campbell's Chunky Soup sitting on the shelf. That's all I'm saying. There's no reason to go hoard toilet paper. Some of you still have a lifetime supply of toilet paper in your garage, and you know it. But again, parents, you should have a contingency plan. I'm not saying it's good, but you should have a contingency plan, particularly if you're in an area that's really blowing up. You should have a contingency plan that school is not going to start when you think it is. And again, not remote learning because so many people are sick. And I've already covered over what you can do. Now, the other thing is there's been a ton of, you got to stop using cloth masks because it's aerosol. We've been saying it's aerosolized since March of 2020 when the first study came out from the University of Nebraska. And I talked with Dr. Mrs. Malcontent, and she was like, it's aerosolized. Just like, look how it's spread. It's aerosolized. And I know they just finally put that one to bed. Okay, it is aerosolized. But yeah, it is. The other thing here, wash your hands. Another thing we've been telling people, plan your grocery trips. I got ADHD if you haven't figured that out yet. I actually like going to the grocery store once a day. What do they have? Ooh, bright, shiny objects. Yeah, so I'm going once a week. The whole social distance thing, and I already said kill the travel. If you're looking for masks, and we've already done a thing about where to find masks and boosters. I need to do a separate TikTok that's just about projectn95.org. Projectn95.org is a nonprofit. They validate all of the manufacturers that they sell. They have N95, KN95, KN94, N100 respirators. They verify all of the suppliers. 60% of masks, like you're getting on Amazon.com, 60% chance it's counterfeit. 60%. I love the glasses. Thank you. One of my favorite ones. I like the dangly lights too. That's another one. I love the glasses. I love the dangly lights. They're very sparkly, very pretty, very sparkly. So we don't recommend getting your stuff from Amazon. They have great prices. They also have child side masks. If you're looking for child, and on the child side, they have the kind with the straps that go to the back, and they have the ones with the loops. Because I get it. The loops don't work as well. You're not going to get as tight a fit. But when it comes to kids, you just want to wear a mask. And if you're going to feel better with the loops, then get the loops, right? Because you're not going to win a battle of will with kids. And just wear the mask. If you're in an area, you're wearing a mask. You can be good. Where's Bob? Bob's really sick. Is Bob vaccinated? I don't know. I do want to talk a little bit about some circulating wishful thinking and disinformation. We always end this up things here. Number one, only the vaccinated are getting Omicron. Thank you for the lights. For the people on the rest of the channels, it's a TikTok thing. Only vaccinated people are getting Omicron. We've put that to bed. We've shown evidence, slides, numbers, data out of South Africa, data out of the UK, data out of New York City, data out of Seattle, Washington. It ain't true. No one with a previous COVID infection is getting Omicron. Tell that to South Africa. And tell that to the UK. Tell that to the hard evidence data that we have out of King County. It's only a cold flu, very mildly. Fauci said so. South Africa said so. Dr. Angelique Coetzee said so. If you're vaccinated. If you're unvaccinated, it's just Delta rebranded, and it's a lot more infectious. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that. Once you get in the hospital, you basically are riding rebranded Delta. This proves that vaccines never work, so there's no sense in getting one. That's strange because basically the people that are vaccinated aren't the ones landing in the hospital. The people who are vaccinated up in the hospital are disabled, elderly, multiple comorbidities, immunocompromised, the people that we want to protect by getting vaccinated in the first place. Those who are winding up in the hospital. Hospitalizations aren't going up. Stays are just for a day or two. Yeah, that's not what they find in the UK. That's not what they're starting to see now in South Africa, because for the people that are now hospitalized, in Gauteng province, hospitalizations are starting to go down. And we predicted that. We said hospitalizations would go down about 9%. I looked at the numbers today. I think it was about 10%. I'll take it. But the percentage of people in ICU and the percentage of people on ventilators and the percentage of people on oxygen is going up as it goes. And we expect that because hospitalization is a trailing indicator. ICU and oxygen dependency is a trailing indicator from hospitalization. And then ultimately mortality is the final indicator. And this is why I'm looking at South Africa, and I'm beyond concerned. I'm convinced that the state of Washington is going to drive off the cliff. And if we're going to drive off a cliff, there's a whole lot of states that are going to drive off the cliff with us. The last one is, this is the end of COVID. This is going to get us to herd immunity. There's just not a lot of data that supports that. And I get it. Pfizer's a medicine company. They want to just sell jabs. Pfizer said we're riding this train till 2024. Maybe. The WHO has implied that this is just going to keep dragging, because there's lots of people that said, even the WHO said don't get a booster because they don't work. That is another piece of misinformation I need to put out there, because that's not what the WHO said. What the WHO said is, and I disagree with this statement to an extent. I don't fully disagree with it, but I disagree with it to an extent. What the WHO is saying is, because wealthy countries are distributing boosters, this is preventing shots from getting to poorer countries. And until we get the poorer countries all vaccinated, we will continue to see mutations, and this will just continue to drag out. There's validity to it, but I don't fully agree with that statement. And here's why. Before Omicron happened, when Delta was going on, South Africa told nations that were sending them vaccines, stop, please. because we're looking for other countries to distribute what you are giving to us. Because our population has eaten us so much disinformation that they're vaccine hesitant and they don't want to get the vaccine. And we're going to have to start throwing them out. Now, that isn't the case for every country. And South Africa is one of the most developed countries on the African continent. And there are countries that have ridiculously low vaccination rates because they can't get a hold of the vaccines. It's true. But it's not a fully and fair statement to say that it's boosters. But what I saw when this statement came out from the WHO was, even the WHO says boosters don't work, so don't get one. Absolutely not what the WHO said. I think that's an important one to bring up on the misinformation front. I cannot believe how many people are watching me on TikTok. Who are you people? Wow, I got all right. And to this point of the future, I want to quote Trevor Bedford from December 17, 2021. Omicron makes things significantly worse. That's his quote. We could have wave evolution. I'm quite worried in 9 months we will have both Omicron and Delta circulating, and Omicron will not get us out of this. The future is a very big number of cases each year with a small number of severe outcomes, and it is something as a society we're going to have to learn to live with. That's what Trevor Bedford said on the 17th. He's very direct. Oh, whoa, I got the Elton John treatment. Thank you. German Health Minister Jens Spahn on November 22nd said, Germans will be vaccinated, cured, or dead by the end of the winter. They're very direct, the Germans, aren't they? People got mad at the friggin' White House statement. The unvaccinated are going to have a very bad winter. Oh my goodness, they went full snowflake over that. They got, for the screw your feelings crowd, their feelings were very hurt when that came out for the. Could you imagine if the friggin' Surgeon General of the United States said, Americans will be vaccinated, cured, or dead by the end of the winter? End of statement. They would lose their shit. Anyway, that's what the German health minister said. And the last quote, knowledge is the best tool to fight against fear. A wise person chooses to be informed so they can make sound decisions, and a fool is controlled by ignorance where fear loves to grow. That's the malcontents, by the way. Spam those hearts. Go ahead and spam those hearts one more time. Let those mods and admins on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter know that they deeply appreciate the mod and admin team and all of the hearts. Wow, look at those hearts. Very cool. I'm seeing all sorts of hearts. Oh my goodness, somebody says they're watching it on both. That is friggin' fantastic. Okay, I'm ready for your questions. Go ahead and hit me with your questions. You have a lonely mod. Is there only one mod? So many plagiaries. Let me see. Go ahead and hit me with questions. I'm seeing a lot of hearts right now, but this is your time. You can hit me with your questions. You're in San Francisco, California. How long until you have a surge there? I don't know what the numbers are, but this is spreading like wildfire. And I think Christmas, New Year's travel and holiday travel is just going to go. It'll hit the cities. It'll fan out into the rural areas next. But I couldn't sit here and look in your eyes and go, here's the day, like I can for King County, because we've spent a lot of time in these numbers. Have you heard if vaccine distribution will improve globally? I haven't heard anything specific on that, right? There are countries that are please, again, South Africa isn't the only country. There's other countries that are getting vaccines and they're throwing them out because people don't want them. The other thing that you have, here's one of the elephants in the room that the World Health Organization isn't talking about when we're talking about vaccine distribution and some of these very poor, undeveloped nations. The vaccines need special handling and special refrigeration. And if you're in an area that is very poor and with a very rural, agrarian-based society, potentially torn by civil strife, they're not going to have these coolers. They don't have the trained people to administer them and prepare them in a safe way and store them. It isn't just as simple as going, here, vaccine. Because they need here, vaccine, and the very expensive specialized freezers to store the vaccine. And then they need a way to take that freezer mobily. They can't just throw it in a Jeep and go drive through the whoop whoop for 20 hours. So there's a lot of logistical problems beyond here, have the vaccines. And a country like South Africa or their neighbors Namibia, I've spent time in Namibia, beautiful country. Unless you get in the real rural areas, they have kind of these networks, right? They can do these distribution pieces. And in the case of Namibia, you have almost over a third of the country is huddled around Windhoek, the capital. There are only about 2.4 million people, and almost 800 to 900,000 of them live around Windhoek. So it's easier in a country like that. But if you're in like you're in the Congo, right? This is much harder. Or if you're Afghanistan, boy, did we really schmaltz that country up, didn't we, America? That's a whole separate TikTok one day. New Pfizer in needing, oh yes, people are just commenting on what I'm saying. When will kids under 5 be eligible? There's other people more qualified to answer that question. And I would say when it gets, by the way, if there's anybody here like if you're one of my mutuals and you're epidemiologist or doctor, go ahead and jump on. I could just turn up the volume really loud on the phone. And like literally I'll just start holding a microphone so the other channels could start hearing it. But what I understand, maybe June. So if I use my corporate speak, either towards the first half of 2022 or early second half of 2022. Namibia, Shelley, do you want to see the Namibia trailer? Are you giving me crap over Namibia? You know what? Just for you, I'm going to play the Namibia trailer and I'm going to talk to the folks on... Yeah, I know. It's not fall of 2021. It's probably going to be, let me use my corporate speak, very late first half 2022 or early second half of 2022. Question came through on TikTok. It's a great question about severity in children. I'm going to speak in generalities because, again, I'm not a physician. I'm not a pediatrician. So I'm only going to talk about the data that we have consumed. But what we have consumed from there is... in Namibia, they saw an increase in hospitalizations, particularly in children under 5 years old. They are seeing a similar trend in the UK. They released a statement, the Secretary of, again, the equivalent of Secretary of Health for the state of New York. Her name is, it's in our story that we put up yesterday, her name and the quote from there. They have seen pediatric hospitalizations in New York City quadruple, or in the state of New York, have quadrupled. And they've put out and they have some data on there. Who's getting hospitalized? Every child 11 and under is unvaccinated that's been hospitalized in New York, and that's quadrupling. Every single one, 11 and under. For those who were 5 to 11, it was preventable. For those who are 12 to 17, only 1/3 are vaccinated. Almost 70% are unvaccinated. Preventable. This was preventable. Get your kid vaccinated. Our vaccination rates in the state of Washington, when you look, like, again, King County, particularly on the I-405 corridor, right, from where I-405 and kind of connects down, and those parts of King County, vaccination rates are really high. I know in our town, our vaccination rates for kids for kids 5 to 11 are higher than a lot of counties in the United States for adults. It's amazing how many kids have gotten vaccinated. But for Washington State, only about 1 in 4 kids have had their first dose. It's way too low. There's so much because of disinformation. And what we're seeing is this is hitting kids harder. Dr. Rubin, that's your dude. Dr. Todd, that's the other one. They're both pediatric specialists. They are great ones to get into the specifics of kids, but they're seeing a lot of child hospitalizations. Yeah, and the thing too here in King County, Mary Bridge and Seattle's Children's. So Mary Bridge is down in Tacoma. Seattle Children's, obviously in Seattle. Both those children's hospitals, they're not like full. They're already full. They're already damn full. They do not have a lot of room. Now, I think something that's in favor for King County right now, school is out. And so I think that's going to help. I don't know what's going to start happening in the 1 to 2 weeks afterwards, particularly with these new CDC guidelines. The CDC guidelines that have come out for healthcare workers are a travesty. And it's only going to accelerate the people who are leaving the healthcare industry and saying goodbye. The American Heart Association protocols that came out are, I'm not a doctor or nurse, so I'm going to call it for what it is. They're bullshit. I was an EMT a long time ago. They're bullshit. Don't take the time to put on the PPE. CPR, doing CPR on a person, it is one of the most, when it comes to spreading COVID, it is one of the most dangerous things you can do in a clinical setting, is give someone CPR. It is right up there with intubation, if you're putting someone on a ventilator, and extubation, when you're taking the tube out. It is truly one of the most dangerous things you can do for putting yourself at risk of catching COVID. And the American Heart Association just basically saying, light casualties are acceptable. Because here's the other thing. I'm going to talk about this for a minute. I'm going to advocate for our healthcare workers. Because this is bullshit. America has been lied to by Hollywood. No, Hollywood lies to America. Yeah, Hollywood lies to America all the time. You've seen CPR in movies and on TV and on streaming. And, it's like 50-50, right? It kind of depends on where to go to story. You remember Grey's Anatomy? I never got into Grey's Anatomy because, I'm a dude. But there was I watched a few because it's in Seattle. Okay, cool, it's in Seattle, hometown. I called it Seattle Doctors Banging, and it wasn't my jam. But they had the ferry accident. They had a ferry, right? They had the ferry disaster one. And one of the lead characters, what'd they do CPR on her? 2 hours? And she fully recovered with no hypoxic injury, no loss of limbs or fingers. Do you know how bullshit that is? You won't come back from 2 hours of CPR. I mean, I'm sure there's somewhere out there someone got 2 hours of CPR as an adult and came back and walked out with no problems. But that's the one person. The reality is, if you get CPR in a hospital setting, your chances of walking out of the hospital when it's all said and done is between 17 and 24%. It might get as high as 30%, depending on how quick the CPR gets started from the point that you have that they have to go to CPR and get you into a correct rhythm again, and the quality of the hospital that's there. So if you're in a level 1 trauma center, you've coded out after you've already been brought in, everybody's already in the room doing their dance, and it's an orchestrated dance with the trauma. Those are the right, and you still got blood in your veins, and those are the situations you might get over 25%. That's it. It's 17 to 25%. It's not Hollywood. And the American Heart Association is telling our doctors and our nurses, don't take the time to put on PPE. Just start breathing into, well, they don't breathe into, squeeze the bag. Just start squeezing the bag and start pumping away. And it's okay. When someone shows up with PPE, they can take over for you. That's what I got to say to that. That's what I did. It's bullshit. And I think our medical professionals have every right to be infuriated over this. And then the other thing, of course, the CDC did is this confusing stuff with the public. And why are they doing this? Remember all the numbers we just went through? And I was showing like the case numbers, and we're seeing what's happening in the UK. We're seeing what's happening in New York. It's starting to happen now in King County and Seattle. It's happening in Miami-Dade County. It's starting in Houston and Harris County, and it's going to be everywhere. And I remember when I said employers should start preparing for large-scale absences. I got to be careful here because you got partners. This is part of the problem when you get bigger and bigger and bigger, because people like it because I'm direct. And it's getting a little harder to get direct as we get more and more people. But we have to keep the wheels of the economy running. And that's really what it comes down to. So you just keep going to work because you need to work. And that's why we've changed these. That's why we've moved the goalposts, because so many people are going to get sick that the wheels are going to fall off the bus. So this is why they've done. And here's the problem. People can't even figure out when to wear a mask or not, as it is. So now we're going to tell people, well, if you test positive for COVID, or if you have a close exposure and you're asymptomatic after 5 days, it's okay to stop quarantining, but just make sure that you wear a mask all the time. We're not going to tell you what type of mask to wear, because I'm going to tell you that the cloth mask that you're going to put, the fashion designer cloth mask that you bought back in 2020 because you thought it looked cool, ain't going to do jack diddly if you are still spreading out. I mean, yeah, it's going to do like a 20 or 30% reduction, which is better than zero. I'm not saying masks don't work. It is better than zero. You need an N95 mask, or a KN95, or a KN94. And they should have said that in the specifications. And this frickin' country should have sent every flippin' American a box of masks. We could have done this. And this isn't Trump could have done it. Biden could have done it. They're both at fault. This whole, we're going to give away 500 million tests. By the time those tests show up, Omicron's going to be over. And people can't buy tests today, and they can't get PCR tests. And the companies and the universities and the labs that are doing PCR tests are already in collapse. The times are getting longer and longer and longer. I've heard in some parts of the country, it's taking a month to get a PCR test appointment. A month? What the hell are you going to do in a month? We knew this was coming. Trump knew this was coming. Biden knew this was coming. And they did nothing. And it's at the governor's level, too. It isn't just at the federal level. It's at the governor's levels, too. And don't forget, the states got billions, with a B, of dollars. Billions. To prepare, and part of what was in that bill, when they passed the American Rescue Plan in March of 2021, remember? The American, right? People got another check. You get the 2,000, they got 1,400, but the 614 because Donald Trump sent the landmine. People were like, wait a minute, how come I'm not getting the 2,000? Well, because you got the 600, 614. And people were pissed. Remember that part? States got billions of dollars. And part of those billions and billions of dollars was to prepare for another surge, to have money in the bank so that if we had an Omicron, we had the dollars to respond before it got out of hand. And here we frickin' are. And those CDC guidelines that are telling healthcare workers, hey, because I want people to understand what could happen here in the state of Washington. Based on the numbers, the state of Washington should run out of hospital capacity by the middle of January at the latest. Now, that doesn't mean bodies are stacked like cordwood outside of hospitals. It just means we're out of beds. Now, that assumes there's no surge capacity, right? And some of that is bad assumptions. But you also are going to have a lot of people getting sick. If hospitals go to crisis standards of care, by the CDC guidelines, if you are mild to moderately ill, your happy ass could be told to still show up. And there are some nurses that have speculated that what could happen is there could be a nurse or a doctor who is now to the point that they are hospitalized. So they're in the hospital bed, and by the guidelines, in theory, because they're moderately ill, in theory, in the worst case scenario, they can be told, you need to take care of the people in this room. We know that's your gig. That's your thing now. Just drag the IV bottle, an oxygen bottle. We'll just give you an oxygen bottle. You go through and do it. There are people that are legitimately concerned that this is where it's going to go. I'm not saying that's where it's going to go, but there are people who are legitimately concerned that this is what our healthcare providers are going to face. Because of crisis standards of care, they could tell you to come in sick. Now, think about this. You got stage 4 cancer. You're on a handful of medications because you're in treatment for it, and you're on a bunch of immunosuppressants. And it's in crisis standards of care, and you have some sort of flare-up, and you want to go to the emergency room. But because they're under crisis standards of care, the person that's caring for you might have an SaO2 of 94% and a fever. These are 2020 rules. And they've established this because they know where it's going. And they've changed the rules for the rest of us because they know where it's going. Why do you think Donald Trump laid out Candace Owens like he did? I think there's a couple of reasons that he did. I don't think there was, I have a TikTok about it. There was nothing altruistic that happened there. That was total gaslighting. Don't forget this. Donald Trump is a former POTUS, President of the United States. He gets the intelligence briefings. He has access to the exact same briefing that Joe Biden gets. Now, I actually don't think for 1 second that Donald Trump reads those intelligence briefings, not for 1 second. But I think people read it for him. And I think there's people in their circle that use it for financial advantage and grifty kind of stuff. That's a separate conversation. But if it's the unvaccinated who are getting hospitalized, if it's the unvaccinated who are dying because of Omicron and the early data that we're seeing out of South Africa and the UK in particular, don't you think when they look at the case numbers and then they look at a state like Georgia, Arizona, Ohio, Nevada, they look at Pennsylvania, they look at states like that and go, it doesn't matter how much gerrymandering we do. If we lose, Georgia, they lose a disparate number, say 30,000 voters, 40,000 voters, right? They lose 30 or 40,000 Republican voters before the 2022 midterms. They're screwed. That's part of the reason. He was like, they work. I got boosted. They work. The only people in the hospital are the people that didn't get vaxxed. The people who are dying are the people that get vaxxed. Now, it's your right. Rights and freedoms. But the people, you should get vaxxed. But again, there was nothing altruistic about there. We have a TikTok about it. You can watch that TikTok later. If you're on the other channels, we have a TikTok about it. You can watch it later. It's total gaslighting. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Completely agree. I'm seeing the comment on TikTok, crisis standards of care potentially everywhere. I think almost any state is a risk. You know what's ironic? States that I think that are in a little bit better shape are some of the states that were in the worst shape just maybe 45 or 60 days ago. Idaho's in a weird place. Idaho's weird. You weird, Idaho. You really weird. The reason I think Idaho's in a weird place, they probably have a ton of, if you could do the serology that they were able to do, it's if the people in Idaho would never let that happen. But if they could, I'm willing to bet you have a really high majority of people in Idaho that got some Delta in there. And what we're seeing is 30 day, 60 day, 90 day, it's giving you some protection. And after 90 day, it just starts falling apart. And the key word there, some. Like, again, enough to keep you from being on a ventilator. I think Alaska's in the same boat. I think Montana's in the same boat. But I look at a state like Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, Georgia. These states make me nervous because they were very early to the Delta party. Oregon, I'm nervous. Oregon is like on the line, right? Because they were the first West Coast state to go kaboom, was Oregon. Hawaii's going to be a state to watch. Hawaii's COVID cases are just like this. And officials there are kind of looking like, well, what's going to happen with the hospitalization numbers? Hawaii's that's a state to watch. They don't have the greatest data, unfortunately. If they had better data, I'd be watching Hawaii very closely. But they don't have the greatest data. I think Eastern Washington's what's going to sink Washington State. Right? Because I talked about this earlier, because when we look at this reduction that it mirrors Gauteng province to the decimal, to the second decimal, it's wild, right? It mirrors it. But Eastern Washington is much lower vaccinated. And I think it's Eastern Washington that will sink the state. Because when your hospitals run out, you send them here. That's what happens. And we have this coordination center at Harborview Medical Center that plays Tetris with the hospital patients, and that's what they do. And I think that just as things are rolling here, things are going to blow up in Eastern Washington, and it's just going to collide. But I think Eastern Washington is maybe 2 weeks behind Seattle. So you're not there yet, but the numbers are growing. And I had listed some counties earlier where I saw those numbers are really high already in Eastern Washington, but it's not everywhere. It's kind of interesting. A couple of counties are shockingly low. Wine country, what I call Washington wine country. So Yakima County, Walla Walla, those areas, you're still in substantial transmission. Those parts of the state aren't too high. That's going to change. That's going to change quick. I'm so glad, Dory, your family is vaccinated in Idaho also. It's going to make a big difference. Yeah, there was a lot of Idahoans that were yeeted by COVID. It's a comment over on the other channel. I'll love it. Renee, I'm loved by TikTok again. Some chuds are in here. It's okay. As long as the chuds semi-behave, we put up with it. Spokane County's at high transmission. We covered that earlier. For people Eastern Washington, I love that Eastern Washington is starting to follow us. I honestly, because a couple of TV stations actually do a pretty decent job of covering COVID stuff, I feel, out of Spokane in particular. But we're really surprised to see how much of a gap, and all these people from Eastern Washington go, we need info, what about it? So we've really started to look more at the state more broadly. And if you go to our most recent TikTok, not the pinned one, but literally the first one after the pinned ones, there's a summary. We're going to do those summaries 5 days a week now. And that includes every county in Washington State by hospital region and the case counts and where they're at. We do it in print, and that's what we share in the other channels, and we'll highlight it on Twitter, but we're setting these up special for TikTok. Because we know that people like that thing. And there's an explanation video. You'll have to dig. It's maybe 6 or 10 TikToks back that's close to 3 minutes. And that explains everything behind those scorecards. It's pretty self-explanatory anyway, but if you're like, I'm lost, what is this? You go find that one, watch that one. And then when you watch the next one, you're like, I totally get it. And we've set them up to be a minute, or under a minute, because we're hearing you. People, I can't share, I can't duet. You don't allow downloads because we have a couple of people who set up fake accounts to look like us. So we turn off downloads. Sorry. So we're trying to get stuff under a minute. The problem is a lot of stuff, it's nuanced and makes it hard. Let's see, more questions. Please stop going to somebody from Hawaii. Please stop going to Hawaii. I know Australia had their first COVID death today too. That was in the news. So they've had theirs. And the cases there are just going like a rocket ship now. I know China just locked down, but I don't know how bad, right? With China, well, I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, but back to the original numbers that China had when all this first started, I don't buy their numbers. I don't think Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent doesn't buy their numbers. A lot of people don't buy their numbers. So there isn't a whole ton of you always kind of, but I did hear some city of 13 million people, they've locked down. They're like, and don't open your windows because it's aerosolized. It's airborne, like in the scene of the movie in Outbreak. Mutable is only spread by direct contact. Now, you said that, Sam. It's mutated. It's airborne. Impossible. Fine. Go to the hospital, see it for yourself. Don't wear a mask, you'll find out faster. It's one of my favorite lines in a movie. DC cases are through the roof. DC cases absolutely through the roof. No, there isn't. Great question. Is there a website where you can find the number of Omicron cases per city and county? America, you're such a hot mess. You are just such a hot mess, America. You really are. Here's the problem. South Africa, all that data is nationalized. So you can go to a national dashboard and see all of the data. In the UK, the data is nationalized. You go to a data dashboard, see all the data. Almost every country is like that. But in the United States, we're reliant on the 50 states plus Washington, D.C., and the Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam, and the Marshall Islands, and America Samoa. And I've probably left a couple of U.S. territories out. And they all do it individually. And they all use their own software. They use their own way of counting. And they all do their own genomic sequencing. And you have some states like Wyoming. Yes, seriously. Wyoming's weird. The state actually doesn't do a very good job with numbers, but the university does an amazing job. They have one of the best scorecards in the country. And Wyoming is one of the best states for genomic sequencing. Mind blown. And then you have other states like South Dakota, where they're like, genomic sequencing? Why would we want to do that? Alaska does 6 times the number of genomic sequencing that the state of South Dakota does. That's why South Dakota was the last state of the country to go, hey, we found an Omicron case. They're hard to find when you're not looking. And so the problem is there's no single view. And so it's impossible to go and look. Now, here in King County and in Washington State, UW Virology Lab is putting their data up on GitHub. We love data. Thank you, UW Virology, for seriously, big shout out, UW Virology. Thank you for sharing the data up on GitHub. It's really been helpful for us. We love kind of tearing into these numbers. But they're not genomic sequencing every PCR test. It's only a portion of it. And those portions are only coming from a handful of counties. And then the counties that report them in isn't necessarily the county where that person lives. It could be from somewhere else. So there's a whole bunch of there. Oh, we love data. We love data. Pax, you want to come on? What did I miss about Snap? Thank you for the comments over there, Pax. Is any other questions? Because I'm going to wrap it up if we're getting ready here. No, there's no lockdowns coming. We have a TikTok about this. We have it in the story and why. November 11th, Department of Homeland Security updated their, I can't say the T word. It's a bad T word. It's when bad people do bad things to scare people. It starts with T. Bulletin flat out said that their number one concern was homegrown, domestic T people, that if a new variant were to arrive and there would be additional measures that would come into place, that they would use that as an excuse to do bad things. So, no. And here's the other thing. We've covered this, and I haven't talked about this a lot, because the anti-vaccination movement in Washington State kind of collapsed after the state of Washington did the vaccine mandate, which went into effect on October 18th. And, the Supreme Court didn't stop it. Federal courts didn't stop it. And all of the predictions from the anti-vaccination leaders, which are concentrated in Southwest Washington and also in the northwest corner of Oregon. That's where a lot, and then out in Spokane. Those are kind of the two big pockets. There's one other person who's a leader up in the Bellingham area, but they're also kind of fading out of view. But those are the three where the leadership, where a lot of the misinformation comes from. And, they had half the employees are going to quit, all the doctors, right? And what happened? 94% of the state got vaccinated, about another 3% got it, because they're not going to give anyone exemptions, and like 3% of people got exemptions. In hospitals, we saw about 97% vaccinated or got exemptions. Some hospital networks even saw higher in the state. And then among the schools, they saw very, very similar numbers. And this collapsed the movement. So we don't talk about it that much. But the anti-vax movement and the anti-government movement, they are intertwined. Del Bigtree is a great example of a person. Oh, I got a guest request. We're going to pull him in. Absolutely. Thank you, mods and admins. Things are going to get a little weird here if you're on our other channels.
Not a problem.
Hey, hey.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Give me 1 second here to do so that people can hear you. I'm literally on the other channels. I'm literally going to have to do this. Why don't you?
For transmission.
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you introduce yourself to the other channels who can't see you?
Right. So, hello everyone. My name is Pax. I am a field epidemiologist in the state of Colorado. I currently lead the Epi strike team. So basically, we're the outbreak control specialist, and I'm trying to manage COVID as best I can. I do a lot of content on TikTok, primarily focused on breaking down misinformation and guiding truth and excellence in epidemiologic reporting.
What do you want to add? You must have stuff you want to add. And if I got anything wrong, go ahead and roast me.
You didn't get anything wrong. You were talking about data. You said, I'm a journalist and an amateur epidemiologist. And in the comments I said, you're like, I'm going to get to it and your mind's going to blow. And I was like, this is just epidemiology foreplay. I mean, this is so good. He's guiding us through South Africa and then the UK and then New York, and then you get to Washington. It tells a great story epidemiologically. And I think that was well done. I don't think I would have anything to add to anything you said. I think you summed it up great. And I like the way you sum it up. And I like a lot of the things you put in your program, primarily because it is very fact based, and you can tell you have that data or that love for data that you talk about, because you're not making things up. And when you said, your mind will be blown, I was like, well, I'll be the judge of that. But when I did that figure in my head and it matched Watang and it's matching in Kings County, I'm like, holy smokes. So I mean, we have data, we have things in predictive models and data sets that can really show what's going to happen, and that worries me in other places that aren't King County.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. If King County was an island unto itself, then I would feel like it's going to get sketchy. It's going to get real sketchy here, but I think we're going to skid under the line. But because we have to support this regional area, including critical patients in Idaho, and not just COVID patients, right? Burns, orthos, major injuries, same thing with Alaska. And there's big ethical questions on saying no in those situations, right? And that's where I'm just like, because this is where it came up, what's going to happen in this is going to blow up in Eastern Washington in these counties that are 35%, 40%, 45% vaccinated, and it's going to sink the rest of the state.
Absolutely. And so someone here is asking about Denver. If we look at what's happening in Seattle, Denver's about 2.5, 3 weeks behind. So we're already seeing cases in Denver skyrocket higher than they have at any point before. And Denver is highly masked, highly vaccinated. And what we're seeing, though, is that the hospitalizations, while on the rise in the vaccinated and boosted, they're not in the hospital. The people with right by REI, like that's a fun place to live at, right down by the park, and there's a lot of people that congregate right there, right? A lot of Denver's homeless population, for example, congregates right near that REI down by the river.
I'm just going to pause you 1 second because people may get confused. He is talking about Denver, not Seattle, and I just want to because of course we have the headquarters here. It's in downtown Seattle, and there's a lot of unhomed that congregate in that area too.
Right, and then Denver and Seattle both share similar names in neighborhoods like Capitol Hill and things like that. So I'll just, yes, thank you for that clarification. But yeah, so we're seeing that, and we're able to look at data from not necessarily New York, but we're looking at King County because they have great data. They have some of the best data we've ever seen. So my division has been looking at that and trying to understand how to model it and mimic that because it really is very, very telling. And so we've been modeling it. We're about 2.5, 3 weeks behind where Seattle is, but we're not seeing anything terrible. But our frontier counties, so the western side of the state and the agriculture counties on the eastern side of the state, low vax, high Delta transmission, are still saying, oh, well, we had Delta, so we have natural immunity, forgetting that this is not an offshoot of Delta. This is an offshoot of the possibly Alpha, or even before that, that's been sitting in the community hidden somewhere. Either, the two predominating theories are the immunocompromised host or the animal host reservoir. We don't know which one yet, doesn't matter, but the monoclonal antibodies aren't going to work. The vaccines have low efficacy because of that. Paxlovid and molnupiravir are going to be iffy at best. Point is, the things we had for the anti-vaxxers or the vaccine hesitant, their line of defense is all gone. I mean, we have nothing for them.
Exactly.
When we had a whole line of things before, they're going to go into hospital. They're going to get sick. They're going to die at alarming rates compared to people who were, even with one dose of the vaccine, those people will die at far less frequency than someone who's unvaccinated and has had COVID 2 times. It doesn't matter how many times you've had COVID. This is something completely different. And that's what I'm trying to get across to people. And they're just not seeing it. And they're just not getting it. And it's heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, there's a TikTok that we did of a young lady, and I was motivated to do it because of the comments. It wasn't anything that she did. For those of you, because I know we have people in other channels and they're like, TikTok's evil, I'm never getting on TikTok. I get it. So I'll give you the backstory. And for those of you in TikTok, you can go dig it up and find it. If you were on New York, hey, I've got COVID TikTok. And by the way, there's Seattle right now. Hey, I got COVID TikTok. She was like, hey, I got Delta like a month ago, and I think that I'm all good. And I start feeling sick. And guess what? I got Omicron. And in the comments, everyone's like, no, you just have Delta again. That's comment after, and of course, you got to take the colonial silver ivermectin, blah, 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 just all the really bad advice. And I made the TikTok because no, you can have Delta a month ago and you can now have Omicron. You can have Omicron and Delta at the same time. You can have Omicron, Delta, and influenza at the same time. In fact, somebody brought up that RSV was being left out of that conversation. I was like, well, you know what? You're right. You could have Delta, Omicron, influenza, and RSV all at the same time, and God help you if that happens.
And just for our audience out there, fun fact: we have passed the record number of RSV cases in the United States. Our last record was in 1920. We are now higher than our 1920 peak.
And that's a big part, actually, of what's filling up the children's hospitals here in the Seattle area, at Mary Bridge, out in Spokane. They have a children's hospital out there, and at Seattle's children. It's a lot of RSV, and it's hospitalizing some adults.
Absolutely, and it's a bad year for respiratory illnesses in general. Flu, RSV. There's also Haemophilus influenza, which is our influenzae. Para-influenzas are going around. It's just a very bizarre year for RSV. And the RSV is more severe than it has been in previous years. And so we're very worried about that. We're finding it in people who are coming off of COVID and they have some long COVID symptoms. And they don't have full respiratory function. And so they're finding that it's very challenging and very tricky to beat it off, or to beat that illness. So they're not able to do it as well, and so it's challenging, and it's just really frustrating for a lot of us.
I've got a question because you were talking about the pool of COVID that's in animals. And honestly, I don't know a lot about that. I saw the headlines about it's in deer. It's like crazy in deer. And I didn't dive into that because we're in an urban area. We do have a lot of deer, like a stunning amount of deer out here. But it's not like you're like, in the rural areas where we got herds and herds of deer. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I'm doing a series right now. I had to take a little bit of a break from it because I've been seeing murmurs right in the kind of the fringe spaces of Facebook about, we're going to start talking about zoonosis as a conspiracy theory. And so I was like, well, let me get ahead of that. And sure enough, I posted a video on Christmas Eve, and I have been just dominated by trolls for the past, the troll farms for the past several days now, on that video on zoonosis. And essentially, the predominant theory in the scientific community right now is that the Omicron variant basically was the reinfection of a person who was immunocompromised, and that spread out like that. That's what science believes. I don't believe that. I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense. Virologically, I'm not buying it, and epidemiologically, it's not making sense for me, because a reinfection at that rate in an immunocompromised host would not allow reinfection to the point of survival of the host, and then reinfection at that massive of a rate. Also, in the spike protein, several of those mutations, at least 7 of them, are predominant in infection in rodents that would allow a rodent to be infected. So we believe that rodents are potentially the host vectors for Omicron. And so what that means with host reservoirs, in what we, I guess, not necessarily like to see, but an idea that it's becoming endemic or moving toward endemic, is that if it's in the host reservoirs, we have the bat version, we have the deer version, we have the mouse version, and that's how we're going to track our cyclical cycles year over year. But that's where we're at right now, and a lot of people aren't buying the host reservoir theory. I am, because it makes a lot of sense from a lot of points of view. But whatever the theory that wins is, I will accept that, because that's what a good scientist does.
How about in the feline space?
We're not seeing a ton of. We're not seeing any reverse zoonosis. We're not seeing any zoonosis in felines. We're seeing a little bit every now and again, but felines already have their own coronaviruses, as do canines, especially domestic. So cats have not been shown to be a risk, nor have dogs. There have been some wild animals at the zoo. So the lions, so we do know that some felines, not the common house feline, have risk, but most zoo animals, from primates to felines to hyenas and everything in between, have had a COVID case of some sort. So we do know that this is virulent, and we do know that zoonosis exists, but we don't know at what rate and what impact that will be.
Super fascinating.
Yeah. So that's what my whole life has been about for the past few weeks. Laughter and Light was like, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm just the person to figure that out for you, and we're going to figure it out. And I have paid dearly, but I don't care. I'm getting the information out, and I really don't care about the troll farms.
Laughter and Light is on TikTok. She is an immunology specialist and one of these people who has a brain the size of a planet.
Absolutely. I learned so much from her, and she challenges me. So I'll talk to her about a theory, and she's like, well, what about this? And she'll poke holes in it. And I don't get frustrated by that. I really enjoy it because she's like, well, but if you say it like that, what's to stop somebody from like countering it with this? And being able to have that, like, that back and forth is really amazing, because most people don't, they just sit back and go, oh, yep, that's right. Sounds good to me. And so being able to have her as sort of that sounding board and have that ability to kind of bounce it off of her using her knowledge of immunology and virology and get that feedback is really priceless, because I don't have immunologists and virologists, on staff at the place where I work. So it's hard to get that feedback that you might get with Laughter Night.
I want to be respectful to our mod and admin team. One thing I want to say, go ahead and spam those hearts. Spam those hearts for our mods and admins, particularly if we're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. You can't do it on Twitter. If you're over there on TikTok, I know we love our little decorations, things that you could do, but you could also just put a bunch of hearts in the comments or tell Pax and I that you love us in a non-creepy way, please. But if anybody's got... please in a non-creepy way. With that said... we have Pax here. We've got me. If anybody's got questions, maybe for about 5 minutes, I think we can open up the floor across both channels. That includes if you're watching us on malcontentnews.tv, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, you can't send us questions. I hate what they did. But if you're on those other channels, you've got a chance to ask an expert. Ask your questions. And Pax, if you just see something go by in the comments, just jump on it, because I'm watching on the other screen.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question here. No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
This one right after. How long until the Omicron peak? It is, I know, the ADHD energy. It's approximately 14 days from now it should peak, but we're going into the worst of it.
Question.
Trips abroad, not for this show. We'll do that some other time.
Question that was asked on this side was your thoughts on the bird flu?
So there is a pretty serious outbreak that's required culling of several birds. There is an article out right now. I don't remember who wrote it. I'd be more than happy to pass that along to you, and you can share with the audience over there. But there is a culling of chickens right now that have a potential to be pandemic level bird flu for 2022.
Wow, I did not know that. Great question then. That's why I was like, bird flu? Like, this isn't even on my radar.
Yeah. I mean, we're so focused on COVID that we do have challenge with a lot of the other nasties out there. Is it, or it was in Israel? Okay, well, perhaps.
Any other questions on any of the channels? Got a couple of more minutes. Got another question on this side. In your opinion, is Omicron reducing the other variants in a positive way?
Reducing other variants in a positive way. Well, the only thing is that there is going to be some competitive pressure on Delta now, and so Delta may have the opportunity to mutate into Pi. And if that's the case, Pi may be slow to spread. Omicron will burn through quickly. We'll lose the natural immunity to Delta. We'll get the new Omicron vaccines, and then the Pi variant will be the offshoot of Delta that we were expecting. Meanwhile, Rho will come out, and I'm just worried that Pi and Rho are going to come in the late spring to early summer. And that's really going to be challenging because Omicron is going to be really, really not great for us. So we'll see, but I'm worried that Delta's still out there. It's hiding in countries where we don't have a lot of transmission with Omicron right now, and that's where we're going to get Pi and Rho coming from.
And I think that's one of the That's one of the reasons when we're trying to analyze what's going on, Pax, that we're not looking like at case progression in the Northeast outside of New York City. Like New York City's like this unique little bubble to compare to almost all the other mid-Atlantic, because there's a lot of Delta mixed into those numbers. And we just don't think that there's a lot of good intel in that data there.
No, there's not. And that's the thing. There's not a lot of good intel anywhere. And one thing that we've lacked on significantly, especially from a public health point of view, is our surveillance has been lacking, significantly lacking. Even in King County, we should be ahead. We should have data models that forecast where we'll be, what the worst case, best case, and any case scenario will be. But we don't have those, and we don't know how we can get to those. And that's the problem. We don't know how to guide public health policy with surveillance, which is the point of surveillance, by saying, hey, mayor of Seattle or mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas, this is what's going to happen if you don't act and don't get people vaccinated. We know this is the case. Here's what's going to happen. And then they can use that to guide politics. Instead, we have gotten into this habit in public health where public health doesn't matter, but politics does. And so it's a frustration for us. We don't have the funding to build those programs, though we know how important they are. And then it's, at the end of the day, the politicians aren't going to be held responsible for any of this. It's going to be public health. Why didn't you tell us about this? And then we lose more funding and more people leave the field. And it's really aggravating, and it's a terrible place to be right now.
A frustration that I have and that I've expressed here, here in Seattle, we have 21 billionaires that live in Seattle or Mercer Island, Medina, and Bellevue. 21 billionaires. Amazon's headquartered here. Microsoft is headquartered here. Google has a huge footprint here. Apple has a significant footprint here. Facebook has a huge footprint here. We have the resources if you're Jeff Bezos, this is couch cushion money. This is not even a trip this is not one ride on a Blue Origin rocket money. And then we have the big brains like Trevor Bedford. No, you're a big brain, but I mean, like, we've got Trevor Bedford here. Yeah. If you took
he's bigger brain than me, right?
If we, Trevor Bedford plus Bill Gates's Gates Foundation money plus unlimited AWS resources equals really good models.
Absolutely. I mean, we ask. I mean, I can build the models. I have a great data modeling background. I build models now. I have a predictive model that I use and that we've implemented in the Colorado State hospitals. And it basically will track down the day you received your exposure based on Omicron, all the data that I've collected. And from that point, it'll tell you what your health outcome is based on a bunch of other factors. There's 10 multiphasic factors that it looks at, and it will tell you what day you should shed the virus, what day the virus will potentially get you through those gates to eat you, if that is potentially an outcome. And looking at this, we're able to save lives because we can go, okay, if this is accurate, then Mrs. X will start to need a ventilator by this day. So we're preparing for that. We know what to do. I mean, these models exist, but I can't get funding. I can't get any other public health department to care about it because they're so swamped with things. So we have this technology, this amazing technology, and it's easy to create, but I don't have the money to distribute it and build it and package it nicely. So yes, and actually I have a person in this live right now who I used it on, and I told him exactly down to the day what day he would shed the virus, what day he would be sick, or what day he would be better, and literally what day he got sick, and it was absolutely correct. It's been right 97% of the time. It's fantastic. We're getting review in a bunch of places, but I can't get funding. CDC doesn't care, NIH doesn't care, and the Bill Gates Foundation, they don't care. So it's really challenging.
I'm looking for it's scrolled. That's why I'm like, where did it go on my screen? It's scrolled. I wanted to finish. Oh, here it is. I found it. This is on a comment, but I'm going to ask this question to you. There's been a study that came out recently. I've seen this quoted around all over the place. that 21% of the United States now is functionally illiterate, incapable of reading, writing, or doing math at a 6th grade level. 1 out of 5 Americans. It's interesting when you look at that number and the percentage of people to say they'll never get vaxxed. But I do know this too. I know some really, really intelligent, brilliant people who won't get vaxxed. So it isn't just about low information. Do you think that the illiteracy, and it's humiliating to refer to the country that I grew up in as illiterate, but do you think that illiteracy is a part of what's fueling this and is not helping us get out of these endless cycles of wave after wave after wave?
Absolutely. So I believe that that anything that is publicly funded, public health or public education, be one or the other, they are at a deficit primarily because we fund them as best we can. We have low hope and little result that they're going to provide anything. You get through public health or public education and you go into college and you find quickly that you didn't learn anything that would prepare you to be in university. The education system falls behind. And then the people who don't go into higher education, they don't challenge themselves to learn more. They know what they know. They go into industry and that's it. And I don't think they're dumb, but I certainly think it's a different kind of knowledge base. And I tell everybody who I talk to about this almost the same thing. It's almost like we're wired differently. I heard the vaccines when they were coming out last year around this time or even earlier than this, and I thought to myself, there's no way. Dr. Fauci said 10 years or 15 years. There's no way that they came out that quick. He said we need at least a year and a half. How is this even possible? And so I was hesitant. But the difference is, as I sat down and I looked at what was being said, what the research was, how far back the research had gone, and how it made sense that these vaccines could possibly be launched. I don't know anything about vaccines. I'm not a vaccinologist. I have a rudimentary knowledge of the immune system at best. And so I was able to parse together just by data, facts, and figures how effective the vaccines could be and what needed to happen within the United States and globally for us to end this pandemic. And once I saw that data, I was able to critically and logically get to the next step, saying, oh, okay, that makes sense. And have since then gone on TikTok literally every day to tell people vaccines are safe and effective. They prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death. They are not 100% effective. The whole spiel, right? We've all heard it before, and it is frustrating. So, yeah, yes, but it's certainly the cause. It's the cause, and yeah, that's all I can say.
I've got a question on this side, and I just want to address it because it's actually not in either of our lanes, and I guess that's how I'm going to address it. Kristen, I see your question. The mods and admins have brought it back up, and I didn't see it when it scrolled by, so I appreciate your patience. You're asking a very specific question to a very specific medical condition that you have. I am not a doctor. Pax is not a doctor. We are not qualified to give out medical advice. And as I did my half-joking disclaimer, the Malcontentment Happy Hour is for entertainment purposes only. You should seek help. You should seek advice from a trained medical professional. And with that half-jokingly said, you really need to talk to your doctor about, and just so you know what the question is, it's about. They're not eligible for a booster in February. Should be advocating for trying to get a booster. And I know there are cases where you can get the booster faster. I do know that for a fact. There are some edge cases where you can get the booster at 3 months instead of 6 months by CDC guidelines, but you're going to have to talk to your primary care physician about that. Now, I will also add this. You can go to the CDC website because it's all public information. Find if your medical condition falls in that. So don't go in and play doctor because they did doctor, but you can advocate for yourself if that's the rules, because the rules are changing so much and the CDC has become a very politicized organization that is driven more by the needs of commerce and political agenda than the public health to be. And that's about the nicest thing that I could say. So there's a lot of confusion on what is and isn't available. And I experienced that firsthand. When I took my daughter to get her second shot and they had changed the protocols in between her first shot and the second shot. And they were like, oh no, you got to come back next week. What do you mean you got to come back next week? Well, because you got to wait another week. No, they don't. It's right here. And I was like, oh, they changed it 2 weeks ago. Okay. That means we got to change a lot of stuff on the website. Great.
Yep. No, I just wanted to say I'm getting someone in one of your other programs knows me. They were just giving me a shout out. So on my text messages. So hello, coworker, pleasure to see you. Or not be seen by you, be heard by you, right? So yes, I like all of those things. I like that in general. And I had another thought, but it was fleeting. Someone in here asked about the CDC guidelines. Should have been in here earlier. Malcontent was quite vocal.
I got on a soapbox, kind of went off on a rant.
And I would say that if I were in a similar position, I also did what I like to call a TikTok version of a hit piece against the CDC today, based on their guidelines. Because as someone who has worked in public health, someone who's worked at this thing since the beginning, someone who has literally had to work last holiday season helping with death certificates because our vital records people passed away because they got COVID, and literally sit there and process death certificates of people my age for hours on end for days. I don't want this thing to continue. I don't want it to continue. I don't want those memories. God, give me a good Hansa virus outbreak or tularemia or something that's not terrible. I mean, I'm just tired of COVID, and I know you guys are too, but we're getting there. Hang in there. Mask up, wash your hands, social distance, get boosted, get vaccinated. Please stay off Facebook and stop looking at the memes.
And the one other thing I would say too, for about the next 60 to 90 days, hold my beer and watch this should not be in your lexicon.
No, never. Please practice basic prevention, basic infection control, and I promise you will be much, much happier. The outcomes are much better for you.
Did I post the article on Twitter? What article? And I'm going to take that as the last question. Did he post the article on Twitter? Who's he and what article, and why we wait for that PAX? I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up on the TikTok side of the house here. TikTok fam, thank you for all the love. And wow, there's 200 of you. Well, not 200 now, but at one point there's 200 of you. That's wild. Who are you people? You can visit our website, malcontentnews.com. You can rewatch this live at malcontentnews.tv. Now all you'll be able to do is hear PAX. You're going to see the other feed. You won't see the TikTok feed. But if you want to rewatch, it's available on malcontentnews.tv. It's also available on Facebook. It's also available on our YouTube channel. It's also available on Twitter. And if you want to watch it without all the comments, and God only knows there are probably some wild comments at some point, Twitter's your avenue because there's no comments there. You can just watch it. And you get to see the Namibia trailer. That's the other thing. And with that, I'm just going to echo what Pax said. If you're not vaxxed, get vaxxed. And I know he echoed the exact thing that I said. 1 dose is better than 0. It's not too late, but the clock's running. And
look, I know people who have gotten their booster. I know people who have gotten their booster dose the same day they got sick with Omicron, and they're literally in this live right now. Please, I'm begging you. I know some of you out there don't want to do this, but if you know in your heart of hearts that not everybody in the whole world can be in on this scheme, you have to go get at least the dose. If you just get that, it's going to be so much better for all of us. You are literally going to overwhelm our hospitals, and I'm going to be out in field tents putting black tags on you because you're not going to make it. That is where we will be. I need you to get vaccinated because I can't go through something like that. I don't want to. I can do field triage, but I don't want to do it. So get vaccinated. Please, I'm begging you.
Get your booster, wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance. New Year's Eve is a no. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the Boston thing. I'm going to go full block because I'm originally from there. You can get your car. You can go down. You can bang a Yui over at the school. When you get to the Rotary, you're going to take the second one. Go to the Packy. Get a bottle of Bubbles. The good stuff, not that cheap shit. You go back home, turn on WBZ, watch the fireworks. That's your fucking Thanksgiving. And your New Year's and your Christmas all together.
Someone who grew up in Connecticut, I appreciate that.
He understood every word I just said. All right, Pax.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, TikTok family, good night. Here, I'm just going to clip up here. All right, there we go. All right, malcontent. Wasn't that great? We tried to set it up. So TikTok came out with this software and they turned it off. We had it all set up like 2 weeks ago. I spent a crap ton of time to get set up, and now they turned it off because apparently there's some dispute that they may have stolen some of the code from the software. I don't know. But we had originally had this all set up that we could just do simulcast on TikTok and be able to pull people from TikTok onto the screen so you could see what was going on here and go back and forth. And we're not able to do that. With that said, something I've learned tonight, what I can do, because we have the tools and the talent, we'll be able to cable in the sound. If we're doing the simulcast on the phone to TikTok, we'll be able to cable in the sound off of there, so we will have better audio. So I don't have to hurt if you didn't notice, I was flipping from hand to hand because my shoulders were like, okay, that's enough, bro. Anyway, you got the numbers. We're in trouble. We're in trouble in Washington State. I don't think that there isn't a state that isn't in trouble. But we get to be first. We get to be first. I mean, we were first, right? We were the first super spreader, going all the way back. We also had kind of, well, that's not true. The first super spreader was in New York at the anime convention. That's the first. We had the second super spreader for Omicron in the country, but we had the first super spreader at the very, very beginning. We had the first patient. We had the first super spreader. We had the first death. We had the first hospital that became overwhelmed with patients. We had the first emergency services department that had to figure out how to deal with these patients. And I will continue to praise the city of Kirkland and Kirkland Fire Department and Kirkland Police Department. And as people know, if you're a longtime malcontent, I'm kind of, I'm a ACAB kind of guy. But I will also give credit where credit is due. Kirkland Fire and Kirkland Police very early on, by mid-February of 2020, because Life Care Center was, it's the flu. We have a flu out. This is flu. And they were like, it don't look like flu. And they started wearing full PPE on their own decisions because they didn't have any guidelines. They just started doing it because they followed their training. They followed their training, and then the police were coming, well, the fire department do, and I guess we're going to do that too. Because the reason we know this is because our mayor, Penny Sweet, put up a tweet with the picture of Kirkland Police in full PPE, going, "Don't be freaking out when they show up at calls at full PPE." That's what we're doing. I really believe that those decisions in mid-February helped in Kirkland keep things more contained. Had they not done that, and then they were just out in public and, doing fireman stuff and police stuff and going into public, I think things would have been a lot worse in this, because more contact points and more spread. So anyway, long explanation, but I want to give credit where credit's due. And we get to be first again, in part because we have the data, as Pax said, and as I've said, right? We have the data. We have access to this information. And because we have access to great data, a lot of the world is looking at us. I'm going to close on one other thing, and I wish I had brought this up with Pax. UK researchers have flat out said that when it comes to figuring out the severity for Omicron, they are watching the United States very closely, specifically because we have areas with very low vaccination rates, who will not seek out conventional medicine once they get sick, who are not vaccinated and are surrounded by people and isolated in like their clans. And, they've said for almost 2 years now, I refuse to be the experiment. And of course, we've always said, welcome to the control group. Well, if you're vaccinated, you're the control group. And if you're unvaccinated, guess what? You're the experiment now. You don't want to be part of the experiment? No. Even Trump said, I know 75% of you are like, I don't care what he said. Wish you would, because it's going to be bad. We're 3 weeks away from really bad. 2.5, 3 weeks away. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's it. Everybody. Thank you so much. This was a tremendous stream tonight. I'm glad we were able to share a ton of information and bring on a guest. We got to bring on more guests. It's hard. I'm so busy and a little overwhelmed. So be good to each other, malcontents. Maybe Thursday. Maybe. We did the live today. Like the mods and admins, I did what they hate. And I admit it. And that's why I'm like, spam the hearts one more time for the mods and admins, please. Give them love. Lots of love. They need the love. The reason I'm saying this is they hate when it's like 6:30. And I'm like, I'm going to do a live. Okay, when? Like today. Like 8:30? Yeah, 8:30. I'm doing a live today. I'm doing a live. And I know we've been inconsistent on the schedule. And it's been tough because there's a lot of work. I have clients canceling work again because of Omicron. Just like, great, it's going to be another suck January and February again. And I'm going to be like coming into the spring going, so is my little marketing agency going out of business? Oh, thank goodness this is over. I'm back on the other side. Tired of it. And with that said, the reason I came on the air tonight is when I ran the update, because we got the updated South Africa data. And when I ran the South Africa data, and then I was looking at what's going on in King County. I was, let me look at the hospitalization. We must have hospitalization. This is 26, and I know we're going to have a lot more data tomorrow. And that data drop's going to be really important. I might be eating crow after we get these numbers, right? Because we're going to have almost another week of data added tomorrow. And it was very clear to me looking at the Washington State Department of Health data that data is missing. And I expected that because this is essentially the day after Christmas. And there's a lot of contributing factors. We have people out sick. We have snowstorm impact. There's some people that literally their jobs would have been to count this stuff up and put in a spreadsheet and may not have showed up at work today. So I could see that some of the data was incomplete. But when I saw this, and if you missed it, you're going to have to go back to the beginning and see this whole buildup that we had. But when I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like when I ran the numbers and I was like, this is South Africa. And then I looked at the South because we've been tracking this maniacally, right? Updating. You don't see it every day, but I've been updating it every day. And when I saw it, it was like to the second decimal point, identical to Gauteng province. That's when I was like, oh my God, we have to do a live. Because these very small, again, compared to what like PAX builds and stuff, this is not, we're not in Python here. These are Excel sheets. But when we crunch these numbers and they're lining up and you're into data, it's like, well, that's cool. Because then it's like we have a little bit of a blueprint, right? Now, I'm looking at 2 weeks of data of South Africa and literally just almost a week of data from King County. And when I say 2 weeks, we're really looking at 6 weeks. But we have 2 weeks of solid hospitalization data now where Omicron's the dominant strain, and we're able to see that progression. And that's giving us that insight. And that's why I was like, okay, because this is providing some validation to the numbers. And that's why then when I ran through the rest of the numbers to go, look, this is just math at this point. And we're in trouble. And, if we get to over 10,000 cases a day, we're in trouble. And oh, by the way, we're probably over 10,000 cases a day. But because PCR testing is so backed up, we're not going to know that for a few more days. But if the doubling rate's continuing at 2.4, and I did check to see if Trevor Bedford, if anybody's watching from Fred Hutch, you could just drop us like a little note or something. Like, would love to know what the RT is for King County if you have updated numbers and what the doubling rate is. I haven't seen numbers in a few days, and I really appreciate that Trevor is a super busy guy who deserves to have a life. But I do know that Fred Hutch, hi. I know you like watch our stuff now and read our stuff. I'm like, whoa, what are you eating? But would love to have doubling rate in RT, so we continue to play do-it-yourself epidemiology. Coming up next on This Old Epidemiology Model. All right, malcontents, it's time to let the mods and admins call it a night. Thank you, everybody, so much, and be good to each other. Stay home, enjoy the snow. Oh, weather? Gonna know more tomorrow because the forecast is really complicated, but right now, I'm feeling like we're gonna have a snow event Wednesday night, Thursday. I'm feeling actually pretty confident about it, but the temperature, it's that close. When I run some numbers, I get 33 degrees as a high, and that's a lot of snow. I run some other numbers, we get 35 degrees as a high, and the moisture comes in later in the day, and that's cold, wet, miserable, crap, awful rain. And I know some of you were like, I want rain, because rain makes all this go, I want snow. But Dr. and Mrs. Malkit and I were just like, it's so beautiful. Look how beautiful it is outside. You know, and it makes me happy. It's all sparkly, shiny. Be good to each other, malcontents. Watch for the snow. Malcontent out.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
He said malcontents Antifa. Fuck you.
You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.